Floyd actually got sort of promoted up into EMC, which is kind of the parent company, I guess, of VMware. So he left me with a talk. It's pretty cool, huh? It's actually really exciting what we're doing, and I'm really glad to be here and glad to be a part of this. So, who is this Jake Robinson guy? So, my background is really in data center and infrastructure in particular, and more specifically VMware. So I come from a small cloud provider back in Indiana called Blue Lock. That's where I started out, and then I was trolling a guy by the name of Nick Weaver on Twitter about hiring puppet experts in Dallas. And I said, why don't you open it up to more people? And he called my bluff, and he got me to come down here. So I have a bone to pick with all you Texans right now. Back in Indiana, we got really cold winters and pretty warm summers, and I was promised warm winters. What the hell?
Statistical anomaly.
Yeah. Some people blame me for coming down from Indiana. And then I was promised 100-degree summers.
It's coming.
Yeah, my neighbors are telling me before to just go with it. Just be,
You have to wait for summer to complain about that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not complaining, actually. So you can find me on Twitter and GitHub at Jake Robinson. I don't have a whole lot of Puppet stuff on my GitHub account. Most of the Puppet stuff that I work on at VMware is all private, but we do have some open source modules that I'll talk about a little bit later. I gab a lot on Twitter about DevOps and Puppet and automation and stuff like that. So I work for VMware, if I didn't mention that already. The VMware Hybrid Cloud Service. Anybody VMware users? VMware vSphere? Yeah, data center. So vCloud Hybrid Service is vSphere and vCloud Director in a stack as a service. And all your virtual machines that you're running inside your local vSphere environment, you can migrate over to vCloud Service. Just think of it as extra capacity. So if you guys are under the gun to get servers and stuff like that, you need some extra capacity, vCloud Hybrid Service is pretty easy to get up and going. You don't have to worry about all the underlying infrastructure, right? Which brings me to Project Zombie. So I work on the team of Project Zombie. And as I mentioned, Nick Weaver, who co-wrote Razor, and also Nan Lu, who wrote that Types of Providers book, started out on the Project Zombie team. And the whole idea was that we've got to set up these VMware stacks over and over and over again for all these private clouds that we're setting up for people, right? So what sort of automation is out there that can handle all the different complex pieces that go into managing setting up that VMware stack? And there really wasn't a sort of a single solution out there. There were a bunch of different tools that were really good at very, very specific things. Puppet, configuration management, is perfect for it. If I want to upload a virtual machine or an OVF into my VMware environment, I'm not going to necessarily use Puppet for that. I'm going to use a tool like OVF tool for the command line, right? So there was this need for all this this complex management around this technology. So Project Zombie is a few large pieces to manage all of that infrastructure and automate the setup and provisioning of these private clouds. So the three different pieces are Res, which is our global inventory management. We have Engine, which is a scalable concurrent execution. And then we have Zed, which is our workflow language and tool. So I'm going to talk about each one of these specifically. So the first is Res. Res is our distributed resource management. It does all of our inventory for all of our basic resources. So if you think of bare metal server, on the back end we use Razor to manage the state and inventory of our bare metal servers. And then we also have storage. We have networking. We have all those IP addresses that we have to manage. And Res is, we have this event store as well that allows us to keep track of the state changes. Every event that happens within the data center to any of our inventory is recorded inside our Cassandra event store. So it's really cool. We're still discovering sort of the data that we can figure out with the event store. I know exactly what a server was doing 10 days ago. I don't know just its state, what it is right now. I know the entire history of that, and we can do some pretty cool things with that. So Res has an API on it, and we can essentially reserve resources for a particular cloud build, or 5 cloud builds at a time. Engine executes our workflows for us. So the operations team can log on and essentially click an action, and which kicks off this entire complex flow to build out a cloud, whether it be a disaster recovery type style cloud, whether it's a private cloud, or even build multi-tenant clouds, which are huge VMware deployments. So what's really cool about Engine is it's globally scaled. So we have data centers all over the world, and we can do some pretty cool things. Like Owen mentioned, don't run don't run Puppet Apply on all your nodes all at once, because you're just going to kill your Puppet master. And Engine allows us to actually do that without killing the entire thing. So what sort of code does Engine run? And that code is called Zed. So Zed is a language and a tool that we built as sort of orchestration. So I mentioned that Puppet in particular, Puppet is very good at configuration management. We have, when you're talking about building complex systems, desired state is mostly pretty close. When you're talking about desired state that's this far away, like there's got to be some transient states within there. So Zed allows us to go run this mcollective command on all these servers, and at the same time go do this other thing over here, set up this VMware switch while setting up all these IP addresses. So we can kick off, Zed allows us to kick off a workflow that can run on 40 different nodes, up to 100 different nodes at a time. I mentioned VMware Puppet modules. Anybody play with VMware's Puppet modules? Not so much. So we've got some open source ones out there, and we'll probably open source some more soon. But the vCenter Server Appliance, the VCSA, is out there. You can download the vCenter Server Appliance for free and actually put it in simulation mode, so you can simulate like 10,000 hosts. I don't know if you guys knew that or not, but look up Google for VC Sim if you're interested in playing around with that. VCSA is, the VCSA Puppet module is really cool. Instead of having to manually go through and put in the end user license agreement and configuring the database and do all that stuff that you would normally have to do at the console of the machine, the Puppet module makes it super simple, and it's abstracted away to the point that it's just like 5 parameters within the resource. It's really cool. vCenter, everybody's probably familiar with vCenter if you do any Puppet work. vCenter allows us to configure clusters, data centers, all that cluster configuration, host configuration, all that. vShield, firewalls, load balancers, we manage all of that. And then we have this standard library, this VMware lib, that has some pretty cool features in it. One of them is Puppet Transport. So a Puppet Transport is a resource that Nan Lu created, and it allows us to manage devices that do not have a Puppet agent on them. So Puppet has this thing called Puppet Devices. We found it to be a little limiting. We have to talk to some devices with more than one protocol. So Puppet Transport allows us to do that. So vCenter, for instance, the vCenter server appliance, we can talk to it via SSH, but we can also talk to it through the vCenter API. And Puppet Transport, or the transport is just set up as a resource, and then you can go, you can see that it's got the username, password, and then the options down there. So it's just basically the insecure true just means that, it's a self-signed cert, don't check for a proper cert. So this transport is actually using the vSphere API. We also have an SSH transport. So when we when we do that initial setup, we can talk to it via SSH, and then once the API is up and going, then we can talk to it via that SOAP API. The vShield API is a RESTful API, so we also have a vShield transport which operates over REST. But again, the problem is we can't, with these appliances, we can't always have an agent running on all these things. So this allows us to still use Puppet to manage the configuration, but do it in such a way that we don't have to have that agent. All right, so ENCs, external node classifiers. What's really cool about operating in a greenfield environment all the time is that you can use basically algorithms, deterministic algorithms to figure out or to build entire data centers with. So we have this thing called resource lib. And resource lib is essentially a large library of algorithms to determine what the IP address of all of the different servers should be. So the architecture team at VMware said, the vCenter server IP address is always going to be .67. But depending on what pod it's in, and what data center it's in, and what shard it's in, it could be completely, and what customer VPC is. That depends on that. That's what the algorithm determines, is that first part of that IP address. And it does this for host names, IP addresses, networks. Everything is calculated using this library. So what that allows us to do, in addition to keeping our data separate from our Puppet modules, is we can use external node classifiers to just go out, calculate that information for me, spit it out in a YAML file, and then apply it with Puppet. So we generate these ENCs dynamically. So I mentioned data separation, obligatory data joke there. Data separation is really important if you're going to get to the scale that we're at. When it comes to code reusability, when it comes to manageability and changing things in more than one spot, you want to keep your Puppet modules as clean as possible. So parameterized classes allow us to use things like external node classifiers to just pass in data to those classes without having to go and change our Puppet modules every single time. So back to that ENC that I mentioned, here's an example of an ENC that our library spits out. This is just a simple ESX configuration. So we actually use the SSH transport to go out to our ESXi servers and actually set the log level. So you can see the vCenter agent log level and then the config log level. So we don't have an ESX Puppet module out there, but if you're interested in that, I want to hear some use cases about what you guys are struggling with as far as doing configuration management with your ESX hosts. So I mentioned transient states earlier, and one of the challenges that we had were that we're setting up a very complex system, and the challenge is if you've ever played with vSwitches, for instance. So we have vSwitches and we have virtual distributed switches, and sort of the transient state between those two things, getting them switched over from vSwitches to virtual distributed switches is hard. I mean, you can't just do it in a single step. So desired state is, there's a desired state that you want, but in order to get there, you're going to have some transient states on the way there. So we use Puppet environments as sort of levels. So we build the environment to a certain point. So we have our Z code actually goes out and calls an mcollective command to say apply it with a deploy environment. So our deploy environment is set to this specific desired state. So it builds up to that level. We run some other orchestration or Z code to do some other configuration in some other systems to get it ready for that next step. So once we do all that stuff in between, then we can go and do that Puppet apply again through mcollective to get it to the final state. So Puppet environments are the way that we do that. Puppet has something called stages or Puppet stage, but they're very, very limited. It really depends on your use case. Puppet environments actually work really well for us. The other thing that we're constantly working on, I'm not saying we're perfect in this manner at all, but there's this idea of this role profile pattern when you're building up your configuration. So if you've not seen this before, this guy by the name of Craig Dunn, who I think is actually a Puppet employee now, wrote this blog post about this role profile pattern and separating sort of business logic from all the technology gunk underneath. And the result are these beautiful manifests. I would go check this out. I'm not going to dive too deep into it, but really when you're designing your modules and your manifests and your resources, look at this pattern, because this is when I saw this, I'm like, this is the right way to do it. This is the way. This is the Puppet way. All right, so I either talked really fast or I didn't have enough slides. So, do you have any questions? Introverts, raise your hands. Yeah. All right, so recruiters, raise your hands. Real questions.
Environment is kind of fresh. You dive a bit more into that, what that environment is fresh is, and how you use environment maybe give us an example.
Yeah, so the question was around environments. I'm trying to think of a specific example, but Owen asked about what the environments were. So we have what we call a deploy environment, and then a production environment. So there are two environments. And essentially, it's just a site PP inside the environments folder, and we have one called deploy and one called production, and it has to do very specifically sort of that in-between gunk that I talked about. Has a lot to do. The V-switches are a great example of that. So we need to get it up to a certain point, and up until that point they're using V-switches, and then we have to do like a network cutover. So in order to get it the last mile, we have to do this network cutover and then continue the configuration. So that'd be one example.
So I guess with this, you're mostly doing a push kind of deployment, because they're not gonna sort of ask every 30 minutes for the configuration. How do you work with like reporting on a vSphere kind of setup?
So reporting.
Yeah, how do you handle reporting?
So, Puppet has some pretty cool reports. The Collective was really cool. Let me go back to your first question. So we use Puppet as a configuration tool, but not a continuous configuration tool. It's sort of I don't want to say fire and forget, but once we're done with the provisioning of the cloud, that's it. We don't want to use additional resources to keep the Puppet agents running. And when it comes to reporting, Puppet is really good at configuration management. You can do some pretty cool reporting things with mCollective, and if you've played with Puppet DB is really cool for reporting stuff. But we tend not to use Puppet for reporting. Because of the infrastructure, because we're VMware and we know the infrastructure so well, we have a lot of other tools that do reporting a lot better. Splunk, Logstash, all those other sort of data sources are much better at reporting.
So it's more of a bootstrap tool, I guess?
Yes. Yeah. So like I said, we have Puppet agents on most of the servers that we can have Puppet agents on, and we'll go out and say mCollective through mCollective, do a Puppet apply. It'll apply that stuff, and we're never daemonizing the agent at all. And then as far as those appliances go, we're running those manifests right from the Puppet master itself, and it's communicating over SSH or RESTful API or SOAP, whatever. Good questions. Anything else? All right. You can find me. I'm a pretty friendly guy. If you want to, talk to me about this stuff, or we are hiring on Project Zombie. So if you want to talk about what it's like to work at VMware, I'm cool with that. If your boss is here, you can hit me on Twitter and talk privately. All right. Thank you guys very much.